Okay, Hannah, I think I'm gonna go ahead and let everybody in.
Good.
And like I said, if there's any if the sound cuts out or something goes weird, I'll rely on you to speak up and tell me to stop and say something.
For sure, I will.
Good morning, everybody. We'll get started here in a minute or two. If you wouldn't mind signing in via the chat with your name, organization, and email address, I'd appreciate that. And we'll probably get started here at 10:02. I saw you walk around the corner. I was like,
Yeah, the front desk didn't really, didn't seem to be aware of.
Yeah.
Because they sent me to the big room, so.
I think there's a transportation meeting in there too.
Yeah, I was hesitant to go in there because it looked like there was something going on, but they said, yeah, go ahead and go in there, that's it. So, sorry to interrupt them.
Good morning, everybody, again. We still have some people trickling in, so I'll give it another minute. But while you're waiting, please sign into the chat if you have not already done that with your name, organization, and email address, and we'll get started here soon. Okay, we'll probably go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our pre-bid workshop for MARC's Regional Housing and Transportation Coordination Study. My name is Cy Splekel. I'll be the project manager for this study, and I'm joined today online with Hannah Mitchell, who is MARC's Regional Housing Program Manager. So we'll be talking through the project and some of the proposal or RFP details. And again, if you haven't signed in already, please enter your name, organization, and email address into the chat, and we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to do a brief introduction to MARC and kind of the history behind some of this work. And then we'll do an overview of the RFP details, the scope of work and timeline. And then there will be a little bit of time at the end for questions. But as the RFP details, there's also a kind of remote virtual question and answer process, and we'll discuss that at the end. So a brief introduction to MARC for those of you that are not familiar, which is probably not very many of you. The Mid-America Regional Council serves as the Greater Kansas City Region's Council of Governments, as well as the Metropolitan Planning Organization. And so as a part of this work, we continually update our long-range transportation plan for the region and identify goals and strategies around vibrant places, connected places, and green places, and connecting these to people in strong communities. And so a lot of this work kind of kind of tries to synthesize the two. And as a part of that, we recently updated our long-range transportation plan. It was passed in June 2025 by our board of directors. And we had a addition to our policy goals this time around that was focused on housing and specifically reducing the housing and transportation cost burden for residents to increase attainability of housing by planning for and connecting housing to our region's activities, centers, and corridors. So this was in response to IIJA, which in 2021 allowed MPOs that serve transportation management areas to integrate housing, transportation, and economic development strategies within their long-range planning and other kind of transportation products, as well as into the actual process of undergoing a coordinated plan between these different planning areas. And so that is the background of why we're here today. So I'll go into some details specifically on the RFP. So everything I just covered pretty much is how the RFP starts. And then it has some additional details on the contract and budget itself. So this will be a contract, a time and materials contract with a budget maximum of $300,000. I'm not sure that it's noted in the RFP, but the budget, yeah, is not required for the proposal. So we just ask for really the project proposal and qualifications, but no detailed budget or fee sheet or anything like that. That will all be done afterwards in negotiation. And we're expecting this project period will be about 12 months, so hopefully kicking off first week of April and then hopefully wrapping up by end of Q1 in 2027. There's some details on our business participation requirements. These are US DOT funds, and so we comply with all federal laws and rules. And then there's a little bit more background on our transportation planning and housing goals, a little beyond what I talked about today. And then it details the submittal requirements for all proposals. So we ask that all proposals come in one electronic copy in PDF format. There is a paper mail option if that is needed, and that information is in the RFP. But with the PDF proposal, we ask that it doesn't exceed 20 pages, excluding any additional attachments or resumes, and that the general font is 12-point Times New Roman. We're not going to be picky with headers or captions or anything like that. It's all, the aesthetic of the document can remain. We just ask that the general text be the 12 points Times New Roman. The proposals are due by 5 o'clock Central Standard Time on February 6th, 2026, which is a Friday, and they are to be submitted to me via email. And once they are submitted, I will confirm receipt and make sure that that I can access the document in its entirety. You can send the PDF directly through email, or you can provide a OneDrive link or something of that sort if the file ends up being too big. But like I said, I will confirm that I can access it once I receive it. The RFP then details the submission requirements. So we're asking that the proposal include the approach that will be used to integrated housing and transportation planning, as well as demonstrated experience and timeliness on similar projects, as well as specific qualifications of the staff that will be working on your team for this, and any resumes that you'd like to attach as a part of that. Additionally, we ask that each proposal have at least 3 references that we could contact to support or back up your proposal and work. And any sub-consultants or teams that you'll be working with, make sure that those details are listed out in their entirety, and clear that they will be working in some capacity on the project. And then there's additional attachments, and I think I have those listed later. But again, MARC reserves the right to reject any or all proposals submitted. Those information's detailed in the RFP. And then it moves into the schedule. So the RFP was released on the 12th. Today is the pre-bid workshop, and questions are due by this Friday. And I will have them posted, answers to all those questions posted on our website, as well as Demand Star no later than January 28th. And then we will immediately begin reviewing those proposals, hopefully with interviews announced the week of the 17th. And then March 4th in the afternoon is when we will be holding those interviews. And we're hoping to get a contract approved by our board of directors by March 24th. And then again, we have the year-long timeline after that. These are the selection criteria that we'll be using to score both the proposals and the interviews. And so the experience on similar project and proposed approach have a little bit more of a weighted score. And then we'll also be looking at understanding of the scope of work, as well as experience and availability of all key personnel that'll be working on the project. I'm not going to go into detail on the pre-bid workshop, but for question submittals, it's a similar process to the RFP. Just make sure that you send those questions to me by the end of the day, Friday. I will respond to you with the answers, but then they will also all be collected and released for the public to view by mid next week. And then we have a couple attachments. Most of these are just required procurement documents because this is federal funding. But I will note that the last attachment, attachment F, is the existing conditions. It's the data that MARC already has available that we're planning to kind of provide upfront to the consultant selected for this project. And so we're asking, I think it details it in the RFP, but we're asking that all bidders look at that information and think about how they can supplement what we have, or what gaps may exist within what we're already proposing to use for this project. So that is the very last attachment of the RFP. And with that, I'm going to pause for a drink and see if there's any questions so far, but if not, I'll get into the scope of work. Okay, cool. So the first task listed in this project is going to be a geospatial analysis. So the idea behind this is that we will be taking all of our land use and transportation existing data that MARC provides, and so that's what was listed in attachment F, and then overlaying all of these with socioeconomic data, housing distribution condition, and commuting patterns to start this analysis. And so, for example, I have up here our transit network, or Smart Moves network. This is actually probably an outdated picture. And then our household change, that's a product of our employment and population forecast. And so this will just be kind of the initial work. And then after that's completed, the first phase of work includes a policy analysis. So this will be looking at land use management plans from the region, as well as benchmarking these with other peer and aspirational communities across the US. And so these are some of the areas that we'd like to emphasis on with policy. So transit-oriented development, transportation demand management, density and infill. So these are general areas that we'd like to emphasize as a part of this policy analysis, but we'll also want some more detail along zoning codes and different area plans. And then the third and fourth products under task 1 are going to be an economic analysis and suitability analysis. So MARC already performs a economic analysis that includes housing and transportation cost burden. And so it'll simply be kind of updating those numbers and again, benchmarking these with these findings with other regions, specifically on the housing and transportation cost burden. That's the example on the right side of the screen. And so we'll be wanting to see how does our cost burden between the two kind of compare to other regions as well as other economic factors? And then the newest part to this scope of work under task one is going to be a suitability analysis. So we'll be wanting to have final recommendations on optimal locations for different housing types based on their access to the transportation network. So this will be merging the policy, the geospatial, and economic analysis to really start pinpointing locations that we can say are our key centers for new housing developments as well as a variety of housing types. The second task in the scope of work is stakeholder engagement. And as noted in the RFP and up here, this is mostly going to be a MARC internal task. We believe that it's really important that as we continue this work beyond this project, that MARC continues to be the face of it, especially, the staff that engage with our community for reoccurring products. So Matt will be leading both the kind of stakeholder advisory group that oversees this, as well as most of the engagement out in our communities. The consultant will be asked to support on documentation and presentations with this, but in general, in terms of the public engagement planning, it'll all be coordinated by MARC staff with the consultant selected for the project. And I have a couple of the perspectives that we're focusing on within the advisory committee, as well as some other groups listed up there. And those are in the RFP as well. The third task under the scope of work is establishing goals and strategies for regional planning. Since this is the first plan of its type for MARC, we're wanting to kind of identify some recommendations for implementation that will likely get baked into our long-range transportation plan and other work areas. And again, there's some areas of emphasis up here around access to employment, anti-displacement, air quality, transportation demand management. So we're looking for specific recommendations and strategies in these areas. And additionally, as a part of this work, we're looking for some support in proposed strategies to improve our land use models that we do with our long-range forecast and long-range transportation plan to kind of better incorporate these ideas beyond what we already produce. And then task four is kind of along the same lines. It's going to be a business plan to synthesize transportation and housing planning. So we have a variety of products that already exist and touch on housing in some way. Connected KC 2050 is our long-range plan. We have a long-range transit plan and bikeway plan, and tons of plans. And so the idea behind this is to figure out where housing fits in all of these and develop specific recommendations and strategies to fit those in that can later be turned into amendments to these documents and adopted by our transportation policy and board of directors. And so we'll be looking at those plans as well as past transportation projects that have been funded either through our federal funding through the suballocated transportation surface transportation program, as well as our local planning dollars that we support through our PSP, Planning Sustainable Places program. And so we'll be wanting to identify within all of that work what projects have over time provided the most support to housing variety and access. And so it'll be taking a look at the past with those programs and projects and then developing recommendations moving forward. And then task five is pretty broad, but we're just wanting to kind of package some technical resources, mostly for our planning partners, but also for MARC to kind of house internally moving forward. So a lot of these are items that we've heard are of interest from our planning directors and community development partners across the region. So guidance on ordinances for regulations that enable housing variety, best practices with developers and lenders. Like I said, it's a pretty broad area, and we'll both want to develop some regional tools, but also maybe pull from national examples and resources and package that into this plan. And the very last one, the Texas Household Affordability Index, that's a internal task that has already started, and I think we'll maybe just ask for a little bit of oversight there as well as kind of benchmarking that with other toolkits and indexes for assessing affordability. And with that, that is all that I have. Final date reminders, questions due. I think those dates are wrong. Sorry, they're due on the 23rd, and then they'll be posted next week. And then a final reminder for all the proposals due end of day, 5 o'clock on the 6th. There's my contact information. If you have any questions or concerns, it can also be found in the RFP. And with that, I'll pause for any questions or comments. Okay, hearing none, I'll give you back 40 minutes of your day. Thank you all for your time, and I look forward to seeing the proposals that we get as a part of this study. So thank you all and have a great rest of your day.
Bye.